Jonathan, can you talk to us about your work and about the reflections that you make about climate change, because you're also actively involved in public debates about climate change and things. Can you tell us, reflect on the work that you do and the contribution of the creative process to what you do?
Okay. I suppose I should say I'm an anthropologist, okay? I usually sort of prefix my things by saying I'm a failed poet, failed dramatist, failed musician, failed novelist, and failed mathematician. But somehow I kind of did anthropology. But what the point is that anthropology, or any of those fields, direct attention to the fact that human beings don't exist as individuals. Right? We all exist surrounded by other people. We borrow things from other people. We talk to other people. We didn't invent our own language. We didn't invent our own culture. We didn't invent the tools that we conceive the world with. They come to us, and of course we contribute to making those tools more refined. Okay, so what I do with climate change is, well, my first plug-in is that I'm Sally's husband, so that's my main role in some ways. So what we try and do is I'm interested in the sociology and the psychology of climate change and how they interact with each other. So what, for instance, I would be interested in, as I was talking about earlier, are things like, how do human beings come to conceive a new situation? How do they come to be not only be able to conceive that, but then to act in it? What are the kind of divisions that the gentleman was talking about earlier? What are the bases of those political arguments? What are the social structures behind them? What are the economic structures behind them? Why are, for instance, we plugged into using coal, which is what my current project is about. Why is we plugged into using coal when we know that coal is actually dangerous? It obviously produces lots of climate change, but it's also heavily poisonous. It destroys environments. In Australia, in New South Wales, some of our best farming land is being completely destroyed in order to to excavate coal. It will never be repaired. It cannot be repaired. That land is gone forever, and it is gone simply, we might say, because of profit. But what is it that makes profit so attractive, and what is it that makes profit such a dominant kind of force in the world? So really what I would try and do is open up the mystery of the thing. Why is it that we are not doing anything? Why is it that our society is completely paralyzed before climate change? What does it do to us? Okay, and partly I think that comes about because we have a lot of technological and habit structures which are built into an old world view that solved heaps and heaps of problems, that increased lots of people's prosperity, that ended a lot of patterns of starvation throughout the world and is continuing to do so. And lots of people then built their lives around these successful structures. The power structures became ingrained into those kinds of structures. So people are faced with, if we actually get rid of all that structure, what does it do to us? It really does open up this existential question. It means all of our lives are almost meaningless because we are so ingrained into a system which is destroying ourselves. Okay, and it's really hard to get out of that. As anyone who knows, who will have tried, you basically are plugged into using the car to go shopping, and the food comes from miles away. You are plugged into unsustainable farming practices and all that kind of thing. No matter how hard you might try and diminish your reliance on that sort of stuff, you are still tied up within it. And as you are tied up within it, you are also supporting it. So what I would still say to everybody is that every little bit that you do, it actually helps. So never feel the problem is so big that whatever you do doesn't matter, because even small changes, if enough people keep doing them, and by doing it yourself, you are encouraging other people to do that. I mean, that's the thing, we are social creatures, right? So every time that you take a radical position, every time that you take a step outside of the rails that are taking us along to destruction, you are setting an example for everybody else. You are potentially changing the world. So you should never dismiss any small action. And obviously that doesn't mean you shouldn't do big actions as well. Okay, but the more that you do the small actions, the more they become habit, the more they build into your life, into your worldview, so it becomes inconceivable that you couldn't take the big actions. Okay, always work from the small upwards. Because one of the problems with revolutions is that people have often tried to work with the big actions, changing the whole of society, without actually changing themselves and their habits, and all they do is replicate another version of what happened before with different people in charge. Okay, so one of the other issues here is that climate change, because it's such a big existential threat, because people are plugged into the power structures and the habit structures, every time someone brings up the issue of climate change, it is deeply threatening to us, okay? Deeply threatening to us whether we believe it, or deeply threatening to us whether we don't believe it. Because if you don't believe it, you still have to know that other people do believe it and that they are going to try and change your life. And this is where this sort of fear of obliteration rather than death comes in. Because at that moment, you are saying to each other that in a way, that I'm a believer in climate change, that those people who don't, they are trying to obliterate my life. They are completely trying to destroy me. To me, that's what it looks like. Okay, and to them, it looks like what I'm trying to do is exactly the same, that I'm trying to obliterate what is a very comfortable, what is very meaningful, and what is a very successful problem-solving life for them. So we are both faced with kind of mutual denial and mutual obliteration of each other. And it's very hard to get over that. And if you've had arguments with people who disagree with you about this sort of thing, you find it tends to get polarized and very angry very quickly, or it tends to get to the stage where people don't actually listen to each other at all. And so again, I would say to people that one of the political actions that you can take is to deliberately not try to obliterate the other, to actually listen to what their concerns are. And you may find that their concerns are actually quite different from what you think. For instance, I mean, a lot of people in the Greens Party are suddenly finding that the farmers who were supposedly their enemy actually really have a strong emotional connection to the country. And they want that country to continue. They want their life to continue as well. But if you can shift it from being sort of the inner city person who knows what they should be doing into someone who also appreciates the beauties and the necessities for agriculture, then a conversation can start. And likewise, if they think, well, you know, maybe that we can teach these people something, then again a conversation starts. So it's really important not to obliterate the other, and it's also really important to just take small steps and do them consistently and build on those. And remember again that you yourself don't have to solve the problem. You are not an isolated individual. You are surrounded by other people. You are engaged in conversations all the time, and that means recognizing other people. And that's kind of what I would say comes out of what I do.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think, Jonathan, you made lots of really interesting and valid points that will start lots of discussions, particularly around the whole concept of obliteration, the idea that small changes are meaningful, rather than in addition to the great big changes that may be difficult or attractive, but the small ones really make a difference. And I'd like to invite you to speak to Jonathan, engage in a conversation with him later, and continue that dialogue. I'm just conscious of the time and having to push along.